Hello and welcome to Original Soundchat, where video game music is a work of art. On each episode, it's our goal to help you learn about 2 soundtracks from the world of games, as well as the people, stories, and critical tracks behind them. My name is DeVader.
And I'm Peter Spezia. We're brought to you by Anonymous Dinosaur and Rhymes with Asia. It's time to appreciate great OSTs and the games that they come from, without getting too bogged down in music theory. Up first this week for our 2 games is 2020's One Piece Pirate Warriors 4. The Musou beat-em-up that features the long-running pirate manga and anime series, which introduces a non-canon ending to the narrative's at-the-time unfinished arc.
Following that is the tale of a small mouse taking on a big problem, recruiting a team of friends as he ricochets his way through giant shard-based monsters. 2021's Beastbreaker.
Happy New Year! It's 2023. Our first episode that we are recording and releasing in the new year. Hope you had a great time with friends and family, celebrating the holidays, celebrating the new year transition. Wow, and we're back at it with a couple games that I don't think we were able to pull too much information together, but they're both games about taking down giant enemies. And I suppose in some games you could make the case that that's the thing about it, but it sure is a thing in Beastbreaker, and it's a new feature for this version of the One Piece Pirate Warriors series, so count it.
Yeah, I feel like it has to be for that game simply because Big Mom exists.
Yeah, and she certainly is among those big enemies. Joe, how are you doing? What are you playing?
Well, weirdly enough, the 2 games I have played since the last time we recorded, I'm not allowed to talk about yet. So, instead, the one I can talk about is I started Persona 2 Eternal Punishment last night, actually. So far, really weird, because one of the first things that happens is Tatsuya, the protagonist of Innocent Sin, talks, like in full sentences, and that's weird. And then you're playing as Maya instead of him, and now she doesn't talk. Because she's the Persona protagonist. It's really, really, really weird. I'm not very far into it. I haven't even fought the first boss yet. I'm looking forward to finding out how confused North Americans must have been in the year 2000 when this game came out and was a direct sequel to a game they didn't get.
Yeah, that's gotta be interesting. I played Immortality.
Yeah.
And beat Immortality. That's a game. I'm so glad I went into it only knowing what I did, and what I did know about Immortality, which you can go play on Game Pass and all that, is that I would love it. Love Sam Barlow's work, her story, all of that. But it's about filmmaking, essentially, and an interactive trilogy of movies starring the same actress. And you may have seen bits of it where you highlight parts of a video scene and you jump to another one that may be related and go from there and mess with the footage and scrub back and forward and things like that. It was so good, so weird, and we had a fun little chat offline about it because you've been talking it up in the back half of 2022.
Yes, and how do you understand what I mean when I say, like, it's the weirdest game I've ever played, and I can't say why?
Well, yeah, definitely. I also recommend, if anyone's interested, play with a controller.
Yeah.
Go play the Xbox version if you got it on Game Pass. Play with a controller on PC. It'll make your life much easier.
One with rumble functionality, specifically.
Preferably, yes. Well, we don't have too much on the game headline front, but since it is the first episode of the new year, let's quickly run through our personal top 10 game lists of 2022. It seems to be what we usually do at the start of the year. It gives us some time to reflect on what we thought about the year in games.
Yeah, so my top 10 kind of came together haphazardly, but I'm pretty happy with the way it shook out. So from number 10 down to number 1, I have Live Alive, Jack Move, Immortality, The Somnium Files, Nirvana Initiative, Chinatown Detective Agency, Hollow Cure, Pokemon Violet, Ghost Song, Power Wash Simulator, and Pokemon Legends Arceus.
Okay. That's an interesting comparison point to some on mine, because when I was playing mine together, it turns out I only played 10 games from 2022 releases, so it was easy to pick which ones are going to make the list, but just how do they sort out? As far as the games at the back end of my list, games that I didn't finish or didn't get along too well with. So when I say number 10 is Elden Ring, big controversy there, I guess. Number 9, Tunic. Number 8, Assassin's Creed Valhalla, Dawn of Ragnarok. Number 7, Kirby and the Forgotten Land. Number 6, The Somnium Files, Nirvana Initiative. Number 5, Pokemon Violet. Number 4, Horizon Forbidden West. Number 3, Immortality. Number 2, Pokemon Legends Arceus. And number 1, God of War, Ragnarok. 2 games with Ragnarok in the title.
That's true. Huh.
So, yeah, that was my year. A fifth of those games being Norse inspired. So yeah, good times. But let's get into the first game this week that we're talking about, and it's One Piece Pirate Warriors 4. A weird pull, but honestly inspired by one song, looking it up, and then be like, let's learn more about the soundtrack as a whole. It was a more difficult endeavor than initially thought. So, One Piece Pirate Warriors 4 released worldwide on March 27th, 2020 for PlayStation 4, Xbox One, Switch, and PC. As these Warriors games generally are, it's developed by Omega Force. And because this company has the One Piece license, it's published by Bandai Namco Entertainment. One Piece Pirate Warriors 4 is a third-person hack-and-slash game against large amounts of enemies, with characters and elements inspired by One Piece. It's a crossover with the long-running One Piece manga and anime franchise, influencing the gameplay of Dynasty Warriors. So it's the One Piece Musou series. You basically complete tasks on a battlefield by defeating army leaders and their hordes with various melee combos and weapons. You secure bases on the map, you find items and treasure chests, and you take down bosses that appear. Then you use the collected items from the levels to upgrade your characters and their special attacks. This game, since it's Pirate Warriors 4, it uses the foundation of the previous 3 games. And it adds 4 new multiplayer modes called Giant Boss Battle, Total Bounty Battle, Timed Defense Battle, and Territory Battle. The new improvements that seem to be changed and improved in gameplay, it's airborne juggling combat and giant characters. Well, what is the story of One Piece Pirate Warriors 4? It's essentially retelling arcs from One Piece. It looks like they start in Arabasta. And the game's story at the time, the narrative of One Piece, the still running pirate franchise, it was during the Wano arc, and it was unfinished. So what the game leads up to, it takes the at the time unfinished Wano arc and modifies the plot with a non-canon ending, with Cavendish and Bartolomeo appearing in the arc to help the captured Straw Hat crew escape their cells. As the battle intensifies between Big Mom and Kaido, a new enemy appears in the form of Blackbeard and his crew. Can Luffy and the Straw Hat crew end the suffering of Wano? Joe, you have experience recently with One Piece, but what are your experiences with One Piece Pirate Warriors 4?
Non-existent. For context, for anybody that does not read One Piece, like I do now, as is my curse that I will have to carry for the rest of time, probably, which I assume is how long it'll take for One Piece to end. Even though the author says that it'll take, we're 2-3 years away from the ending. I don't believe him. Wano ended last year, late last year. Wano was not over when I caught up. It had just started ending, which is absolutely hilarious when you remember this game came out in 2020, and like late 2022 is when Wano ended. But I have never played any of the Pirate Warriors games. This is the one I'm most familiar with in general, just because I think Matt did the review of the Switch version and said it was really good, and that's as far as I know.
Okay, that's good to know on the Our Friends and Nintendo World Report front. Yeah, I have very limited experience with One Piece. You mentioned how you went on a blitz to read all of it last year, and that sure was the curse you brought upon yourself.
It's up to 1,070 chapters.
It's crazy. That's a whole lot. But I remember watching the 4Kids take on the anime back in the day, really only getting up through Arabasta, and then didn't really continue on past that. So I think you pick up certain things about One Piece online if you are in that manga anime space. You see certain characters who become part of the Straw Hat crew. You see characters who have been popular that decide not to join the Straw Hat crew. So, you know, it's things like that like I'm aware of One Piece. I am not aware of all the characters because, as Musou games tend to do, there are a whole bunch of playable characters to add and add the replayability and hours for this game. So a lot of those names do not sound or look familiar, but I think it's impressive that they can continue with, you know, a game series and, you know, One Piece games throughout the years in general. But I think it's fitting for One Piece to have a Musou series. Do I know if they'll have another one? Maybe when the series is over? Yeah, maybe when it's over. But One Piece is trying something new now, and that is why we're talking about One Piece now at the start of the year here. So not much out there when it comes to development information on One Piece Pirate Warriors 4. The Wikipedia and fandom articles, shockingly brief. Almost like, was there any engagement or interest in this version? I don't know. But the game was revealed on July 5th, 2019 at an Anime Expo panel, and development on it had taken about 3 years because Pirate Warriors 3 had released in 2015. As of the game releasing, it celebrates the 20th anniversary of the anime. So, hey, it's a special little note there for the game. There are 52 characters that are playable in the game. There are 43 in the base game as playable characters. And then this game got DLC, like 3 waves of DLC, so you can get an additional 9 playable characters there. Not going to list off all of them. I'd probably mispronounce a lot of them, or people would get mad. Or Joe, you'd correct me on the spot. But that's a whole lot of characters there.
I don't know if I can correct them because I've only read most of these names. I've never heard them said. Like, I've been pronouncing it Alabasta the whole time. I don't know which one of us is right. I assume you, because you got it from, like, people vocally saying it. I just read it.
I mean, I remember it Alabasta at the time for the anime, but that was the 4Kidsification of it. So when I look on fan wikis and I see it as Arabasta, and it's like, oh, well, was that just, you know, unaware English animes changing R's to L's at the time? Zolo?
It might also just be like, there's still people that disagree on whether it's Zoro or Zolo. I believe the official translation of the manga still calls him Zolo.
Weird. Don't like that. The game reviewed decently well with a Metacritic average of 75 and 76 on PlayStation 4 and Xbox One. The game has a 69 on Switch. Nice.
Nice.
It's rewarding for fans of the franchise with fun combat and a deep roster, but there isn't too much that's new here. And like Matt may have pointed out, there were some performance struggles on the Switch. But it reached 1 million copies sold faster than any other Pirate Warriors game. As of August 2022, Pirate Warriors 4 has sold over 2 million copies. Not too bad for an anime Musou spinoff. I mean, that isn't like a Nintendo property and all that. Did the game win any awards? Nope. Let's talk about its legacy, at least. After the Wano Country arc has been completed now, One Piece is supposedly in its final saga. How long that will take, as you mentioned, who knows? Does Oda even know? Who really knows?
Supposedly he does know how it's going to end, exactly how it's going to end.
Well, he better. He's been crafting the story for so many years, yeah.
I think somebody asked him at one point, he's like, yeah, I have it written down somewhere in case I die.
Oh, well, yeah, I mean, that's probably a good backup point just in case. The next One Piece video game, however, is One Piece Odyssey, which is a turn-based JRPG that kind of looks a little Tales-ish, and then it makes sense because music for the game will be composed by Motoi Sakuraba. The game launches January 13th, 2023 on PS4, PS5, Xbox Series X and S, and PC.
Yeah, I'm not 100% certain whether or not I'm going to give One Piece Odyssey a shot. Maybe eventually. Probably not at launch and probably not for full price, but I might try it at some point.
As far as the combat goes, it kind of reminded me a little bit of Yakuza Like a Dragon. Take that for what you will. Obviously not like the main world gameplay and exploration. I feel like that's a little bit Tales of-ish, even with like little character scenes and conversations there. But it certainly seems like a different kind of One Piece game. One that's certainly inspired by other JRPGs out there, but new for a One Piece game. The composer that we'll highlight this week for One Piece Pirate Warriors 4 is Masayoshi Sasaki. Masayoshi Sasaki was born on February 19th, 1973 in Kyushu, Japan. He is a longtime sound director, guitarist, and composer at Koei Tecmo, usually going by the alias Masa, M-A-S-A in all caps, though he left the company in February 2022, and he now seems to be at WFS Inc., which is a mobile game studio. Masa aspired to become a professional musician since he was young. He moved to Tokyo, he studied at a music college, and he became a regular in the indie music circles there. While his parents tried to deter him from any professional music future, he pushed on, and since he liked video games during his childhood, he thought of pursuing a career composing video game music. Though when he applied to work at Koei, he wasn't familiar with any of their intellectual properties, but apparently his guitar performance was impressive enough to have him named sound creator and put in charge of composing background music. Once he has the input of a project's director, Masa's musical goal is to, quote, amplify the heart and soul of a work for the player's enjoyment. Whenever Masa composes music for a new Warrior sequel, he looks through an English dictionary to name it with a, quote, hard and raw image.
Oh, no.
Oh, yes. You can follow Masayoshi Sasaki on Twitter at SASSATT. Basically, his discography is like all of the Warriors games you can think of since 2000, including most recently Persona 5 Strikers. Though, when it comes to our usual sources for game soundtracks and things like that and who did which track, it makes it difficult because One Piece Pirate Warriors 4 does not have an officially released soundtrack, which is pretty peculiar in this day and age. It even took up digging the end credits sequence to find who was on the composing team, because other websites that usually document game credits like that did not have any information for One Piece Pirate Warriors 4. So the credited composers include Takashi Yoshida, Shinichiro Nakamura, Hiroaki Takahashi, and Masayoshi Sasaki, or Masa, as he's credited. Masato Koike, who we talked about in episode 129 of the show for his work on Hyrule Warriors, he's the sound team manager, so even he has a role with this game. Yeah, really peculiar not to have any information about this game's soundtrack, really, or much development of this game, but I found the music to be interesting enough to talk about. And as we get to the 5 critical tracks here, I hope you agree. We're going to start with, what seems to be a prominent theme in this series. It's Pirate Warriors' main theme. I'm going to guess, for it being Pirate Warriors' main theme, or at least that's the title that it's assigned by fans. I don't know if there's an in-game sound test that maybe gives it that. Anyway, it seems to be a prominent theme for the series, so probably one that's carried over from past games. And it's really interesting to hear this because you think of Warriors games having these energetic kind of themes, but what makes it a One Piece Musou theme? Why don't we have it sound a little bit like its famous first opening of We Are, especially that rising chord kind of leading into the big action of the piece. Definitely gives some big We Are vibes, and I think that's definitely intentional. But yeah, I think it's pretty different compared to the rest of the soundtrack, which kind of leans into more electric guitars, heavier accents, some bright brass. I mean, this is kind of more, I feel like it's One Piece and introductory. It kind of matches that theme, but One Piece's soundtrack is totally different with Kohei Tanaka. You can listen to his work on Gravity Rush, as we mentioned when we talk about that game. Like that's the One Piece composer for the anime, at least for most of it. But for this, when you're trying to have some brighter energy for a Musou, going to sound a little different, but at least the main theme seems to capture that We Are spirit.
I don't know what I picture when I think of One Piece. I should note, I've never seen a single episode of the anime in any way, shape, or form.
Oh, that's crazy.
Whether it be for kids or not. I think I've seen like bits and pieces just because I live with my roommate and he is, I believe, caught up with the One Piece anime, which took him years, by the way. But this is like, I don't know, something about the feeling of this song feels very Luffy to me. Specifically Luffy. It just has this heroic feeling to it, and I really dig it. And yeah, it is different from what I expect a Warriors song to sound like, but it's still very good.
Number 2 on the Critical 5 tracks for One Piece Pirate Warriors 4. This one is I Will Surpass You. Now this is more up the Warriors alley, the Musou alley. Really bright trumpet lines there, and whether the whole horn line and then what sounds almost like a little more trumpet solos later, but also that electric guitar ripping. I'm going to guess that's got to be Masa playing that. Of course, with not much information out there, they don't credit who worked on which song. But when you got, shredding guitars like that, would not surprise me if that is Masa there. Interesting to guess where this plays. From what I can tell, I Will Surpass You is also a track title on the One Piece OST for the anime, or at least its point in the anime, seemingly where Luffy faces Lucci. Maybe that I Will Surpass You kind of ties up with a line that is spoken at that moment. So maybe when the story is retold, this plays in a cutscene or a battle level after that. Just a guess. Not much out there, but that's what the impression I get from it is. And yeah, this is more what I imagine when you talk about Warriors music, Musou music, and yeah, it delivers.
Yeah, Lucci is one of the more notable fights. Happens during what I think is the best arc in the series, which I'm going to guess the next one does too, because the next title is a reference to one of the best moments in the whole series. But that's a very memorable fight simply because it is top tier. Yeah, no, like Luffy's not going to win this one. And then he does. Spoiler alert, because Luffy's won like everything. Because he's Luffy. And it's just a really interesting fight with a very, very cocky character, like a very arrogant character. And this sort of triumphant Warriors electric guitar rockin' feel to it really, really fits the feeling of beating the ever-loving crap out of that man. Pigeon Man, as he is affectionately called by Luffy. It's good. It's fitting.
We get to track number 3 on the Critical 5. And this is the one. This turned my ear on to this music and this soundtrack. So it has to be here. This is I Want to Live. Carries a similar musical energy, and if you're listening to this and thinking, why does that sound familiar? Yes, I see you too watch the YouTuber Alpharad and his videos. It's generally featured in some Super Smash Brothers compilations there. So, of course, if you're a One Piece fan, you know that I Want to Live, as you refer, Joe, it's a reference to a big moment with Nico Robin, and I'm going to guess this plays in a similar context of either during the cutscene or the gameplay that follows. If you're gonna title it that, it's got to be tied into that moment, right? From what I can tell, at least Pirate Warriors 3 as well has a similar track titled this, probably to match with the moment in the gameplay, but it goes with a totally different vibe. And kind of like a softer, maybe more grand take on it. But this one is just fun. And I don't know how well it matches the emotional moment there, but wow, it's an energetic and catchy tune for this soundtrack.
It's a very, very emotional moment. It's a very important moment for the character of Nico Robin. And it's also why Nico Robin's the best character in One Piece. Don't at me.
Oh, I agree. From what I know, I agree.
She's the best. I love her. She's great. But if I remember the moment correctly, it does transition straight into Luffy going, all right, and then fight starts.
Okay.
Which I think probably fits with this song. You can tell there is a bit of an emotional aspect to the song, at the very least, in the melody and everything. I think I could see it fitting. I'd have to see the cutscene itself, honestly. And maybe one day I will. Matt and I have actually talked about streaming this game. So
interesting.
Maybe one day.
Well, hopefully this track stands out, because it was one that I'm like, oh, I need to know what this song is. And then I'm like, it's from this One Piece Musou game. And then let's learn more about it. learn more about tracks like critical track number 4 on the soundtrack to One Piece Pirate Warriors 4. And fittingly, this is called Gear 4. It's a different kind of instrumentation there to represent the it's almost Super Saiyan-like, shall we say, change in Luffy gearing up. And, he's got a Gear 2 and I guess a Gear 4 here, so just becoming more powerful. And so to represent this, especially, I would imagine, in gameplay that calls for a higher difficulty or a higher need to power up, a track that represents the Gear 4 shift definitely seems to be a fan favorite on this one, and it's a really interesting and different sort of shift, almost like a little bit of a swing jazzy feel to it. And I maybe almost like, I don't know, I kind of get holiday vibes, but maybe that's just recency bias on hearing, Christmas music and things like that lately. But this seemed to be like a popular fan pick, and it makes sense with the kind of power up that was necessary.
Gear 4 is also known as Bounce Man. Mm-hmm. I believe it first shows up in Dressrosa. I'm pretty sure against the fight against Don Quixote, which is a pretty good fight. It's the goofiest looking gear. For people that don't know, the gears are essentially One Piece's equivalent to Super Saiyan, sort of, with Luffy having Gear 2 and 3 before this, essentially introduced at the same time, and then Gear 4 in this arc, and then, just recently, Gear 5 got introduced as well.
Yeah, where he's more of a snake man, right?
It's really weird. He's a Looney Tunes character.
Oh.
Functioning with Looney Tunes logic. It's bizarre. But, in this one, in Gear 4, he's giant, big, muscular, and, a giant bouncy ball, essentially. A bouncy ball of muscles. And, I think this does fit the feeling of a power-up. Even with how goofy Luffy looks in Gear 4, I think this would still probably do a good job of making it feel awesome, because it is pretty cool, and that fight is pretty cool, and that arc also covers one of my most irrational fears. It's great.
We'll wrap things up on the Critical 5 with number 5 here, and this one, you gotta go for a final boss encounter, right? This is called The Real Strongest Creature. So in this non-canon ending to the Wano arc, and how they make up how it ends for the sake of the game, because nothing was finalized at the time, they're like, all right, we'll fight Kaido. And so that kind of makes sense, I suppose, with some of the instruments that are introduced with kind of more traditional Japanese instruments there. The beginning of this piece, at least, I get Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild vibes, which is I don't know, a little weird to me. But at least you definitely feel the higher sense of stakes here that, yeah, it's still a Warriors song, it's still a Musou song, but you're kind of just tweaking what's going on for the stakes of a final boss encounter, and I feel like this does a good job with that.
Yeah, this definitely feels Kaido-ish. Kaido is a dragon, so having the traditional Japanese instruments fits especially well, even though it would fit normally because Wano is just Japan. It's just Japan. But for Kaido specifically, I think, yeah, this sounds very, very fitting and has a good sense of stake. Like you said, I like it.
We got a couple tracks on the cutting room floor, and these are more ones that just, caught my ear musically. So the first one of these is The City of Water, Water 7. I'm just going to imagine that whenever you hear a solo guitar here like this, it's got to be Masa, right? I'm just going to take that. That's what happens when you don't credit your games appropriately. Anyway, you get some nice jazzy swing brass lines here, which are just a whole lot of fun, but also you got accordions in there. And, coming off of our recent Professor Layton episode, we do love us some accordions in there. I feel like for, the Water 7 arc, I'm guessing that it kind of has like a lighter, more aqua environment, which I could see fitting with this musically, but just, it was really fun and peppy and just a nice sound to this one.
Water 7 is a Venice-like city.
There you go.
With a bunch of shipports. It's also where you meet Frankie, who is also great. It's actually the arc that happens like right before. I can never remember the name of the government facility she goes to, but right before the Nico Robin stuff, like the big stuff.
Is that the Ennius Lobby or?
Ennius Lobby, yes, that's what it is. There we go. I keep wanting to say Impel Down, but it's not Impel Down. That's a different place. This fits Water 7 a lot. Specifically, it fits Frankie a lot because he's this big, goofy robot man. And I love him with all my heart. And it's perfect for both the city and the character that is most importantly met there.
Some emotional melodrama and cutscenes, I guess, gets played out here in this other track on the cutting room floor. And this one is Agony. Yeah, I guess if you gotta, have some tracks that go along with, other big emotional moments, I think like ones involving Sanji, maybe, if YouTube comments are anything to be believed, you get this piece that kind of opens with this lighter acoustic guitar part, but then big swell and, kind of hits the big time there. Just another one that, catches your ear for different use of musical instruments, but then, really brings in with the solo electric guitar and the brass and all that comes in. Starts, slow and emotional, but then really brings up the moment with some good instrumentation and just the overall sound of it. Really nice.
Yeah, this is a really nice sounding piece. The vague name, unfortunately, does not give me any hints as to where it could play.
Sure, yeah.
That Agony could describe a lot of scenes in One Piece. But yeah, overall, this does have a bit more of an emotional tone to it, and I dig it a lot. It's very good.
What will I never forget about One Piece Pirate Warriors 4? Never played it. Not itching to play it anytime soon. I still have a lot to learn about One Piece if I'm ever going to get the real appreciation out of it. Look, I think this game's honestly for fans. So, Joe, I think, especially after your blitz through the franchise, I think it may be one that you enjoy and get a sense of. You'd have appreciation for it, but...
And I believe it's on Game Pass.
Really? So that may be a place for fans of the crew of the Merry Go and Thousand Sunny. If you want to get your Musou in with Luffy and the gang, then go ahead and give that a shot. If anything, what'll I never forget about One Piece? That damn 4Kids rap.
Now that I have heard, That, at the very least, I have heard.
I feel like you got to if you're a child of the late 90s, early 2000s.
Man, just mentioning the merry-go remembers that this series made me emotional over a boat one time. That's weird. I really like One Piece, even though when I caught up with it, it was mostly as a joke. Not really as a joke. I had always been kind of interested in One Piece, but catching up with it as fast as I did was for sure a joke. And I'm enjoying keeping up with it. I look forward to it ending around the time when I die. When I'm like 90. When Oda and his cybernetic implants are finishing the series. But yeah, like I said, Matt and I have talked about streaming this game. We think we want to stream 3 first, even though we're told 3 is not good. Because 3 starts at the beginning of the series instead of in Alabasta, but I don't know. I don't know if that's gonna happen anytime soon, because it turns out there are only so many days in the week, and you can't stream every day or you will burn out.
Yep. Yeah, that's an idea. Maybe you start with 3 just to catch up and then pick up 4 when you get to Alabasta.
That might be exactly what we do, honestly. I don't know how far 3 goes, but I mean, Alabasta's like one of the first really, really good arcs of One Piece. So,
yeah, I would agree with that for the little I know and the little I have seen. Well, to transition to our next game, we like to highlight a fan cover, a fan remake, whether it's on YouTube, OC Remix, wherever. Well, it's interesting to look up, try to look up One Piece covers, One Piece remixes, and things like that. Then you also get news like, hey, remember that there's a One Piece Netflix series that's being worked on? A live action One Piece?
And I'm sure it'll be great.
Yeah, and it won't be canceled after 1 season.
I'm sure the CGI on Luffy is going to look definitely not horrifying.
Although they have done little mini docs on like how they're building out the sets, and it looks pretty impressive on that front, but never any guarantee. Anyway, when it comes to music and fan covers and remakes, you get covers of the One Piece OPs and things like that. And it sounds like they do have the many of the OPs, at least, on the soundtrack. You gotta have We Are, Believe, and things like that, right? But nothing really done as far as the original music from the Pirate Warriors game. And so we'll highlight another track here from that. It's called Welcome to the Gallery. And it's a fun little bit of vaudeville piano. It's just different, I'm sure, when you're checking out the gallery menu options. So please enjoy that. We'll be right back.
Alright, let's transition from one of the most famous anime manga series of all time to a game that statistically you unfortunately probably did not play. And that game is Beast Breaker, which released September 23rd, 2021 for the Nintendo Switch and PC. Specifically, it is an Epic Games Store exclusive still, I believe. It was developed and published by Vodio Games. And it is a game where the player takes control of a small mouse named Skipper, as he takes on massive beasts that are made up of individual shards in various geometric shapes. Levels begin with a hunting phase, which is actually my least favorite part of the game, placing both the player and the beast on a hex grid populated by a village, various resources for crafting, and 3 pools of magical waste. This section is kind of a balancing act. The player can go around and collect a bunch of resources, then return to the village, craft some items that'll make the fight a little bit easier. But at the same time that you are moving around, the beast is also moving around and making its way to those pools of magical waste. And with each one it reaches, it absorbs it, and it gets stronger. And once all 3 of them have been absorbed, the beast will then make its way to the village, and if it successfully reaches the village, it's game over. So the player must intercept the beast at some point in this process to initiate the fight, at which point battle works A lot like you would think pinball, or I've never played this, but I've heard it compared many times to Peggle, specifically. So the beast, like I said, made up of various geometric shapes. Some of those shapes have numbers on them, and these numbers indicate how many times that shard must be hit before it breaks. And the way you do battle is Skipper can be launched forward and will bounce off of any surface that he hits. And he goes until a number indicating how much he can move hits 0. And in order to defeat the beast, the player must destroy a specific core shard. But there is a time limit on this. See, there's a rage counter that goes down every turn. And if it hits 0, the beast will decide to ignore Skipper and go destroy the village anyways, resulting in a game over. You can reset this rage counter by destroying a shard. It can also be reset by a partner character that Skipper brings along who will distract the beast and reset the counter once per battle. And eventually you unlock the ability to bring multiple partners, and it gets a little bit easier as you go. The plot of Beastbreaker is that in a world where magic waste has caused a near apocalypse and scoured the lands, massive beasts wander the world, threatening villages all over. A young mouse named Skipper lives on Whiskersmith Farm with his grandmother and cousin. And when a beast makes its way to the farm, a mysterious being asks somebody at the farm to, quote, raise your sword once more. Having received this message instead of its desired recipient, Skipper decides to pick up his grandmother's sword and take on the beast himself. When he is successful in defeating it, he becomes determined to continue responding to distress signals from villages that are in danger. Along the way, he begins building a team of like-minded individuals, and slowly, the world is made a slightly safer place. And the mystery of where the beasts are coming from in the first place gets closer and closer to an answer. Here's where I will ask, what are your experiences with Beastbreaker?
I remember it being on the best of list for 2021, or at least it was an honorable mention. Was it an honorable mention? It was in there somewhere.
I think it was an honorable mention, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, so the title sounds familiar at least, and some of the visuals as well. Did I remember that it was basically Peggle-like combat? No, not at all. It seems very interesting and good to watch it in action and kind of get a sense visually of what this game looks like.
Yeah, I played it in 2021 because I had seen a bunch of the indie game connected people on my Twitter feed talk about how it was awesome. And so I gave it a shot and I liked it. I played the whole thing. I think the soundtrack is absolutely fantastic, as you will hear when we get there. I don't like the hunting prep phase. I really don't. I think it's kind of frustrating and a little bit tedious, even though it's short. But the battles are very satisfying and very fun, and the characters in the game are a lot of fun to get to know, and all that sort of stuff. It's great. I like Beastbreaker a lot. More people should play it. Please. I would love to see the game get a little bit more attention, because I can't find a lot of information on Beastbreaker's development. I do know that some of the team behind Beastbreaker, most notably designer Asher Vollmer, were also behind the popular puzzle game Threes, which I have never played, but I have heard of.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And specifically, Vodio Games is especially notable, as it was the first certified unionized video game studio in North America as of December 2021. And unfortunately, I say was, because despite the unionization getting a good amount of press attention, this did not really translate into Beastbreaker game sales or into the ability to acquire funding for their next project. So in September of 2022, Vodio Games Twitter announced that the studio would be closing its doors. The Vodio Games Union Twitter announced that because they had been informed the studio was no longer going to be financially viable to keep open, they halted negotiation. Their last effort, according to them, is going to be a Steam release of Beastbreaker. Like I said, right now, if you want to buy the PC version, it is only on the Epic Game Store. That Steam release has still not happened at time of release of this episode, but hopefully soon. And honestly, this game wasn't even very widely reviewed. There's not enough reviews for it to have an overall Metacritic score, even. I think the Switch version has 2 reviews and the PC version has 1, which is a shame. It is, however, very highly regarded by those who have played it. The user score for the Switch version, at least, is an 8. Now, the music was done by an artist that I was familiar with before this. His name is Big Giant Circles. His actual name is Jimmy Henson, but he goes by Big Giant Circles. And unfortunately, he's yet another person who I couldn't really find a ton about. He was born July 27th, 1981, and he actually got his start as one of the bigger artists associated with Overclocked Remix, which is where I first heard of him. I think also Extra Credits gave him a shout out at one point when they did like an episode that was specifically, here's some cool game remixers that you should look into. And he was one of them.
Mm-hmm.
You can follow him on Twitter at Big Giant Circles, and you can also buy his stuff at biggiantcircles.bandcamp.com. His discography, he's done a bunch of games that are all small and most of which I've never heard of, being The Haunting of Magnolia Manor, Pocket Mine, Puzzle Juice, Zombocalypse 2, Extreme Bike Trip, Journey of 1,000 Stars, Extreme Road Trip 2. He was the composer behind Threes, which might explain how he ended up on Beastbreaker. Hive Jump, Octogeddon, There Came an Echo, which, weird fun fact I learned about that specific one. One of the tracks that he wrote for that game, There Came an Echo, actually got reused later as a background track in Season 2 of Stranger Things. So that's odd. And then, of course, Beastbreaker. He also is credited with contributing tracks to Just Shapes and Beats, Borderlands 2, Super Street Fighter 2 Turbo HD Remix, Call of Duty Black Ops 2 and Black Ops Cold War, and Mass Effect 2. And he also does a lot of work with Loading Ready Run, whom I am a big fan of. Most notably, he did the soundtrack for their series Road Quest, which people should watch because it is very good. They did a road trip, Top Gear style, from their island in British Columbia all the way up to the Yukon, and it's a fun series, and he did a great job on the soundtrack for it. In terms of historical development research, I couldn't actually find any information on the making of this game's music, but I did want to point out that it actually does a really cool thing, though, where the music for the prep hunting phase will actually dynamically fade into a more high-energy or threatening version of the song once the first strike of the battle has been made, which we'll hear a version of both, but I think it's really, really neat when it happens, so it's not going to be reflected in any of the critical tracks, because that's how it goes, but hearing it in-game is a very special experience, I think. So speaking of those 5 critical tracks, let's get on into them. I'm very excited to mention these because, I think this soundtrack is absolutely fantastic. The first one being Skipper's Song. This is the music that plays on the title screen of the game, and it's one of my favorites just because of the feeling it gives. I think it has a really good sense of representing something that is very small, but it also has this very optimistic feeling to it. It's a very simple melody, and then is later joined by a bunch of other instruments. much like how Skipper is later joined by a team of people as he moves on. And I just think this song is really nice and has this great feeling of like, I think it fits Skipper great as a character, and I really, really appreciate that.
I also think it fits the artwork on the album nicely. If you check out the video version, you see it's Skipper there in a cloak and just kind of looking out to this big field with some sort of star monster flying on the horizon, but just the gusty feel on the plains. I feel like that's kind of represented well, at least with that kind of key visual. The flute performance sounds so good, and it's almost like a guitar mandolin-ish that's kind of accompanying it. It's a really nice, pleasant sound, but yeah, the start of a bigger adventure to come.
And continuing in the more low-key stuff before we get into the big stuff, critical track number 2 is Hearth and Home. Between missions, you go back to Whiskersmith Farm, which is the headquarters, basically, for the whole team that Skipper gathers. And there are 4 rooms that you can go between that all have their own functions, and different characters hang out in those rooms. And each one has a variation of this song. The 4 rooms being the den, the kitchen, the forge, and the cellar, and this is for the den, specifically. And I like this one the best because it just has this very simple feeling to it. It's very homey. It feels warm and peaceful, and just the cello in there is just very, very nice to listen to. And I definitely really like the piano part. The dun 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 dun. I really, really, really like this song. It makes me feel at home, and so for that reason, it is my favorite version of it.
Absolutely. It's the right warm texture for it. Homey's a good word for it. And yeah, that cello comes in the middle of the piece and highlighted in the clip here, and it's just the perfect accompaniment there. Really great stuff.
Let's get into one of the battle themes, my personal favorite regular battle theme. Critical track number 3, this is Thorns and Shards.
I feel like you gotta be extra careful when you're saying shard.
That's true. Shard. And that's a word I'm gonna say a lot today. Oh boy. This is probably one of my favorite of the regular battle themes. It's one of them for the forest area. And you can hear in the clip when that beat kicks in. Oh, it's so cool. I really, really like the chimes just in general. They're very catchy. They also remind me a lot of Severed. Like some of the stuff I liked that Severed did.
Yeah.
But here, like, especially, this is the one I think sounds the coolest when it transitions from the regular version into the battle version. But the battle version is the one I remember the most when I think about this game. And this song just has this really cool sense of movement to it, and I super dig it.
Yeah, you go from nice and relaxed and no percussion to an electronic drum kit that's really giving you a good sense of pace. The kind of subdividing rhythms there really keep the energy up for sure. And I could totally see this as, transitioning to a battle track. And yeah, you can totally get the sense of kicking it in. It gives a good feeling to the player to really engage in combat.
And more of that really, really good flute.
Yeah, of course.
Which is just fantastic. Critical track number 4 is actually a prep phase song. This is Nothing Good Grows Here. So like I said, this is prep phase music, specifically for the desert area. And it's, to be honest, nothing too different from what you would expect a desert song in a video game to sound like. It does a very good job at that sort of harsh feeling of the harsh, heartless desert that's gonna kill you the first chance it gets. And I think more than anything, I'm kind of torn between, you can hear both of them in the clip. I'm torn between my favorite parts being the like sliding string part, the I think that part's really cool, but also the vocal percussion that comes in near the end of the clip, I think is super neat sounding. And I really, really like that part. I don't know, there's a certain feeling you expect from desert music in video games, and this definitely fits it, but I think it's upper tier in terms of that type of song.
Yeah, I was thinking the same thing. Like, you generally expect a certain sound from a desert piece, and I think this fits the bill really well for that. But also, you're right, that vocal rhythm and percussion at the end definitely gives it a new wrinkle. So, kind of checks all the boxes and then gives you a little bit more with this piece for sure.
And finally, critical track number 5 is actually my favorite song in the game. This is A Team Assembled. So the final boss of Beastbreaker is actually a 4-part battle, like 4 back-to-back fights. This is part 3 of 4. Every single phase has a different variation of this piece. And usually you'd think like, oh, the best one is definitely going to be saved for 4. This is actually my favorite variation of all of them. They're all good, but I think these are the best. I also just really like the track names for the fight, which is A Stand Taken, A Promise Kept, A Team Assembled, A Final Battle. Just, like, even the track names have this sense of, like, it all comes down to this. Like, this is what you have been going towards this entire time. And especially, you can hear in the clip, bringing Skipper's song back at the very end for this last fight is just so cool.
Always an inspired choice in games, right? To bring back the main theme, but in a more epic context and, usually a musically and melodically enhanced version.
Yeah, it is so well done. And I didn't have a lot of trouble with the final boss because by then I had found a weapon ability combination that was actually broken that I think made it impossible for me to lose, essentially, as long as I didn't screw up. But this music, man, like, I think this specific song, this and Skipper's song were the two where I was like, I gotta talk about this game on the show at some point. They're absolutely fantastic. I love this game's soundtrack, and this is such a good example as to why.
Absolutely. Like, this really sounds like it fits the final boss sort of stakes and theming of everything. And yeah, to bring back Skipper's song in a dramatic horn line just top-notch stuff here.
For tracks on the cutting room floor, I got 2. First one is Hexawhip Hassles. This is one of the battle themes for the coast. That's all I remember about it. It just sounds super cool. Hexawhips, I believe, are like octopus-shaped beasts. Which this is the only one on the whole list that has the name of a beast on it. There are a lot of them that are named after the beasts you fight. But this one specifically, I remember because the coast is one of the most interesting areas, I think. Introduced one of the most interesting characters, who is a pirate who hates magic because he has seen what it has done to the world, and he is pretty damn determined to get rid of every trace of it that there is. It's just a really neat song, I think. It fits super well for the coast and also for the stakes of fighting a giant monster.
It sounds nice and different, too, as far as where the importance of, the music is placed here. Like, the importance of the bass line here to then go with a different kind of drum sound, especially compared to the earlier battle track. And then you're doing interesting stuff with these other string instruments, these plucked strings. A very different texture and key and vibe with this one. Really cool.
And the other track on the cutting room floor for me is Forged from Fear. I don't actually know where this song plays. I don't remember, but it's here because when I was re-listening through the soundtrack, I thought it was really cool. It's a very good song, so here it is.
Slower, dramatic, tension. You got the vocals that are just slightly in the background. Yeah, very different. If you can't remember where it is, good to at least have it here on the cutting room floor. Really nice inclusion to round things out.
So what will I never forget about Beastbreaker? First of all, this game deserves a lot more attention than it got. It's a very good game. As you have heard, is a fantastic soundtrack. This just scratches the surface of how much good stuff is in this soundtrack. It's absolutely fantastic. And the game is fun to play, and people should give it a shot. But also, I kind of really like the sort of message that the game gives. So Skipper's grandma was a beast breaker before this. She and her sister were famous for slaying beasts all the time, and then she stopped when her sister was killed. And she doesn't talk a ton about her sister, but she takes care of both Skipper and his cousin, who is a squirrel somehow, whatever that means. And she is constantly trying to talk him out of, like, you don't need to do this. Like, this is dangerous. You are putting yourself in harm's way for people you don't even know. And Skipper is constantly reminding her, like, yeah, but this is the right thing to do. If you have the ability to help somebody and you don't help them, that's not right. And you gotta remember, we are all in this together. And that's kind of the message that I took away from Beastbreaker. And I think it is a very good message to put across, especially in the times like these.
Yeah, doesn't that just hit home? I think, it's a soundtrack that definitely punches above its weight class. And, you gotta love that. Gotta shout that out for sure. Well, for games that are both about, taking on giant enemies, quite the interesting pairing between One Piece Pirate Warriors 4 and Beastbreaker. Certainly quite a thumbnail pairing between the two. But that will do it for us this week to get back into the groove here in 2023 for Original Soundchat. You can find me on Twitter at PeteSpeakEasy. Joe is over at StringPixel. The video version of the show is on the Rhymes with Asia YouTube channel, but it's that MP3 podcast version that you want, and that's hosted by Anonymous Dinosaur at anondino.squarespace.com. That's where Joe's other podcast, Smasherpieces, is hosted. And you can find Smasherpieces and Original Soundchat wherever you get your podcasts. Catchers all around the globe, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, even on Spotify, where we have a feed of podcast episodes, but we also have a Spotify playlist, where if we talk about a video game track on the show and it's on Spotify, it gets added to this monster mammoth playlist. Joe, what's being added this week?
So One Piece is not on Spotify, but Beastbreaker is, which if you liked what you heard this episode, you should go give that a listen. Also, apologies. I am very behind on adding tracks to the playlist. I think I still have to add From Demon Turf On. That's my bad. That'll be fixed by the next time we record. But also, despite all of the weird struggles that the studio has had, Disco Elysium just got thrown onto Spotify, like the actual game's soundtrack. I assume probably because British Sea Power owns the rights to the soundtrack, and not the studio that made the game, which is good. Indie games should always be like, all games should be like that, actually, but indie games especially should always be like that. So that'll also end up on there when I get my act together.
Good stuff. Yeah, good to see that pop up there. We love seeing past games we've talked about finally getting added to that playlist. And when you're done listening, you can find the show on social media at Soundchat OST. Leave some feedback for us. How are we doing with these episodes? Also give us some suggestions for games to cover in the future. All right, Joe, who are we talking about next week?
I will be talking about Hiroki Morishita.
And I will be talking about Mac Quail. All right, Joe, let's play us out.
Obviously, I could not find any remixes of the soundtrack of Beastbreaker, which again is a shame. A shame. There is so much good material here that people should be using. So, as usual, I'm gonna pick a song from the game that wasn't on the list, and this is another song from the home of Whiskersmith. Farms being the kitchen music. It is called Snacks and Snails, which is a very fun title to say, and I hope you enjoy it.
Thanks so much for listening this week on Original Soundchat. We'll see you next time. Take care.